Arthur Smith can be tough to understand at times, both audibly and just in some of the advanced terminology that he casually throws out. But man, did he make a statement yesterday that caught my ear. Good morning to you. Good Friday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Steelers. It comes your way bright and early every weekday if you're into hockey and or baseball. I also offer daily shots of Penguins and Pirates in the same place that you found this. It's funny that for all the various subjects that we can all discuss related to this football team, and some of them really compelling, all roads somehow always lead back to the offensive line. And what do you know? Here we are again. Because the challenge that was presented by the Jets last week won't be the challenge that's presented by their New Jersey neighbors. The Giants have 31 sacks. The Giants bring Dexter Lawrence and a bunch of monsters, whereas the Jets are mostly built on Sauce Gardner and their pass defense. So the guys who will be the most challenged are the guys who always end up seeming in every single scenario to be the most challenged, and that's the big boys up front, which on the surface would appear to be just an awful matchup. Just that one. I'm not talking about the two teams. Just Steelers' offensive line, whether it's protecting Russell Wilson or finding holes for Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren. They're going to have Cordero Patterson back too, against all those sacking guys. And I believe that almost all the way. Listen to Smith yesterday on the South Side when asked about the current state of the line in terms of performance, in terms of zone blocking, some of the stuff that he wanted to bring here as coordinator.
You know, it's a fine line in the NFL. You talk about details, difference between a very average run and a really good run, and those are the details. And that's credit to those guys and the way they've been working since the spring and Latrobe and getting in sync. And it hasn't been perfect, but there's progress being made. But again, it's got to show up week in, week out. Like I said, I mean, there were certain schemes Vegas did, the way they play defense, good defense, a lot of multiple fronts, Jets, top flight defense, they play a little bit different, so that'll kind of be game plan too, but how you build it goes back to the basics, those fundamentals, and that's what's been encouraged.
Okay, like I told you, that wasn't going to be crystal clear, but I still prefer to play the audio so that you can hear the man in his own words and his own intonation. And that, my friends, is a coordinator who's seeing real progress. He's bringing up, you heard him use the word details, specific things that he's appreciating from these guys in film study. And that's very different than some of the assessments, whether it was from Smith or Mike Tomlin or whoever over the course of the season, of these guys, of this line. Now, let's carry that forward, because I think we can all recognize, especially after a year of fussing and fretting over him, in most cases without cause, that Dan Moore's been stable this year. Dan's never going to be one of those guys that looks dominant over there. And he'd tell you the same thing, okay? He's out there to do whatever it is that he needs to do to make each snap as much of a success as it can be. Isaac Seumalo, known commodity. Isaac's healthy. Isaac's back. It's the rest of the group that's an issue. Or at least it should be an issue, I guess. Ryan McCollum's playing center in place of Zach Frazier. He's going to do it again. Ideally, Frazier is back after the bye week to face the Commanders. And when Tomlin was asked about McCollum earlier this week, he gave him a double thumbs up. That's his term, not mine. Those three words, double thumbs up. I'd not heard that from him. Maybe he's spoken it a time or two in his life. I'd just never heard it. He could have just said, standard is the standard, next man up, whatever else here. He didn't. They really liked what they saw in McCollum. After the game in Las Vegas, it was Broderick Jones who caught my attention passing through his part of the locker room and said, "How about McCollum, huh?" So they were all talking about it. And yes, I'll get to Brod in a minute. Mason McCormick. Let me tell you what I think about McCormick. at right guard, because I've already shared with you the stories about how he's getting these guys all amped up, both on and off the field. He's outwardly emotional in an uncommon way for his position. But I'm going to throw a name at you here from a relatively recent past to describe, or to help describe, McCormick, and that's B.J. Finney. Remember him? B.J. was that guy who you'd only be thinking about him when somebody else got hurt, but B.J. would get out there and you'd look at his stature and you wouldn't be overly impressed, and kind of like the way I was just describing Dan, he's not somebody who's going to be pancaking anybody, but he's a fighter. He's a junkyard dog. He's a scrapper, a scratch and claw. I could do this all day, but that's what he is. That's what he is. That emotion, that fire, that's actually part of who he is as a football player. It's how he wins his own battles. I am not about to be a complete buffoon here and suggest that McCormick's going to be a better overall performer than James Daniels was when Daniels was, one of the Steelers' highest graded players at any position, not just on offense, on both sides of the ball. But I am going to say that I really feel like they all needed someone of that mentality on the line, someone to help bring everyone together. JD had all his strengths, and JD is a good dude and was one of the many people working with both Broad and Troy Fautanu when he was healthy to make them better players. So I don't want to knock JD either and his intangibles, but this dude is something else. And if you ask me, that is what Broad needs next to him. That's the temperament that Broad needs next to him. That's the guts that Broad needs next to him. By that, I mean the guts to say, hey, you, ho, wake up. What are you doing? What are you doing? We need you, man. You can't be doing that again. And I've already heard from some of the others on the line that that's part of what you get from him out there. Now, maybe there's something else. Maybe there's something more than that that's motivating first Tomlin and then Smith to praise these guys the way they did. I don't believe they're just trying to pump their tires. I really don't. Not when Tomlin's inventing new terminology and Smith is getting that much into the micro portions of the game. When we come back, J1Q. Luxembourg, Garbett, Kelly & George is a personal injury law firm in Western Pennsylvania that represents injured people in automobile accidents, workers' compensation cases, and medical malpractice claims. The attorneys at Luxembourg, Garbett, Kelly & George pride themselves in doing what they say they're going to do. It's important to them that when they make you a promise, they keep that promise. And this law firm has been keeping promises for over 80 years. Luxembourg, Garbett, Kelly & George has been AV rated. That's the highest rating a law firm can receive for legal ability and ethics. And the lawyers at the firm have been designated super lawyers, that's a real thing, for over 15 years. Rare combination there. Luxembourg, Garbett, Kelly & George has offices in Cranberry, Newcastle, Beaver Falls, Butler, and Elwood City. Learn more about them at lgkg.com or by calling 888-842-5454. Again, that's 888-842-5454. Today's J1Q comes from Connor, who says, DK, oddly enough, one of my concerns, the Steelers starting Russell Wilson, was that he would actually do good. Now, I'm thrilled that this sets us up for a really good season with Justin Fields to back him up, but this does make me concerned about the franchise's longer-term future. It was assumed at the beginning of the year that this season would likely be the first and the last for Wilson or Fields here. So if Wilson returns to his Seattle form and gives the Steelers their first playoff victory in almost a decade, what does that mean for Fields next year? Because I can't imagine that Tomlin would then cut Wilson loose. You know what, Connor? I thought about this stuff a lot more before the change than I have since the change. And I'm sure that's for the same reason that most others have kind of set it in the back of the mind as well. And that's that Wilson went out there in the second half and showed everybody that he's still got Wilson-level capability. And more important than any of that, the one thing that I think Russ achieved above anything else in that game was to establish visually, and I don't mean that this was his goal, I mean this is for those of us watching, establish visually that he's doing different things with the offense. He's bringing something new to this offense that wasn't there with Fields. I feel like he had to do that in order to, I don't want to say keep the job through the game against the Giants, because I don't know how long or short Tomlin's leash would have been, but he had to demonstrate that there was something that he could bring that the other guy couldn't, because the other guy already had demonstrated the stuff that he could bring that the other guy couldn't at age 36, most notably and obviously the legs. And again, Russ did that, and he did it in a big way in that second half. Can't say enough about how he performed in the second half and the impact that he had on the overall offense. But yeah, what do you do with the other guy? This kind of got glossed over, I feel like, from the other night, but Tomlin was asked if, when the Steelers got down inside the opponent's 5-yard line, if he'd considered using Fields in that situation. And Tomlin elected to give that just a one-word no, and then look around the rest of the room. Now, that might have sounded like some kind of, I don't know, shot at Fields or whatever. I'm positive that it wouldn't have been that. Rather, it was just Tomlin saying this was going to be Russ's game. Now, you can go ahead and have that same mindset next Monday night. You can do the same thing and let Russ cook, I guess, is the operative term that's all over social media right now. Let Russ cook. Well, unless Russ is actively seeking out an executive chef, he'll probably do it alone again. And that's where I'm going to kind of join you in getting a little cringy, both for the now and for the future. For the now, I have somebody who's that talented. I want him on the field in some form or other. I don't want to, just to put it in an almost mean-sounding way, I don't want the ball in Van Jefferson's hands more than it's in Fields' hands. I don't care about positions and hierarchy and depth charts. I want my most dynamic, my most electric playmaker, and that actually is what Fields is, with all due respect to the way George Pickens performed last Sunday. I want to see him used. I want to see him used the best way that the team can use him. Now, maybe you save him for the divisional games or the ones where you got to run a lot and you want to try some different things against, the Cincinnatis and the Baltimores and the Clevelands, where you got to play them back to back in close proximity, pull some surprises out of Tomlin's figurative hip pocket. But yeah, I also want to see him play, and I don't know that you're going to see him progress in practices. That's a rare bird that can do that. And in Fields' case, he has no experience with it. I don't mean in the NFL. I mean in his life. He's always been the guy wherever he's been, including the 3 years in Chicago and including the 6 games here in Pittsburgh. So yeah, it's definitely a subject to keep weighing as we move along. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Steelers. And don't forget, we have a double shot of Steelers coming up at 4 p.m. this afternoon. You can find that on all of our platforms in video form and audio form, the whole deal. And this show will be back Monday morning, but with a preview